Good Friday morning. Today is the memorial or the feast, the memorial of St. Thomas Aquinas, the great theologian, 13th century theologian. And I like to reflect on that, okay? Because it's not just Thomas Aquinas, who was a great Dominican along with Albert the Great, his teacher, but it was a great period, my God, 13th and 14th centuries, and the genius of the church. It's a huge period, okay? It gets knocked during the Enlightenment, but they can knock it all they want. They never put anything together like that. And it was a brilliant, brilliant moment. And I'll share it with you. You not only had St. Thomas Aquinas and the Dominican, okay, they're Dominicans, Albert the Great, but they also had St. Bonaventure, the great Franciscan, Duns Scotus. Great period, my God, what a period, okay? It was a period of Catholic intellectual genius. And what it showed, and it's a perfect model of the faith embracing the world, faith seeking understanding, fides quaerens intellectum, the faith seeking to understand itself, embracing the wisdom of the world as the means by which the faith articulates and reflects on itself. You had to know the controversy of the time. Roughly a century and a half before, when the writings of Aristotle had been rediscovered. Okay, this was a new Renaissance. The Renaissance, there's a number of Renaissances, but the great, of course, the one is the 14th century, but this is before that, okay? 15th century. This is before that, and it occurred around 1000, or if I may be wrong, but around 1000, 1100, okay? When the Crusaders reconquered the Middle East, Jerusalem, basically. They rediscovered, and the North Africa, the great libraries. North Africa was so far advanced over Europe in terms of its intellectual life, its great scholars, its great schools of thought. The Arabs were way, way beyond us, okay? That's just the truth. And when they were conquered, their writings were all rediscovered, and in it was the writings of Aristotle and Plato, okay? And they were the pagans. And for Christian Europe, they were hard to swallow because they were pagans. There's no question about it, especially Aristotle. Plato had already been a part of the Christian theological synthesis, through what they call Neoplatonism, but not Aristotle. And Aristotle was this breath of fresh air, kind of a radical, non-theological, very naturalistic philosophy, okay? Both the philosophy of nature, but also moral philosophy, ethics, still to this day, his virtue theory, okay? His humanism. Well, these fellas, that once Aristotle got translated into Latin, these guys read him. They began to read Aristotle, and they embraced Aristotle. And it made things nervous, okay? Aquinas was held suspect for a while and all the rest because they were really reading the dangerous authors, namely, primarily Aristotle. But then they put together some of the most incredibly brilliant syntheses of philosophical theology ever conceived. What can equal the writings of these men at that time? What is today there's even close? We're still reading Aquinas today as if he was here, contemporary, meaning theologians today and philosophers are reading Aquinas. Not just Christians, not just Catholics, world over. The world over. One of the best places in which Aquinas was studied was at Cornell, roughly 40 years ago, and the Norman Kretzmann produced some of the best Thomistic scholars. And or my own colleague, Eleanor Stump, is world-class Thomistic scholar. She is a Catholic, okay? But when she was studying him, she wasn't. See? That's interesting. Powerful intellects. These were geniuses who put together both their biblical faith and the secular wisdom of the world, and they were able to put together a creative synthesis. It's pure genius. With a great personality differences, when you read St. Bonaventure, you're seeing a mystical tradition that's not quite the same as you see it in the Dominican tradition, the Franciscan tradition, not the Dominican tradition. I used to like to read Bonaventure most of all, the Itinerarium Mennocedeum, the Mind's Road to God. Damn, those guys were geniuses. To this day, you read that thing in awe. Not because it's old, but because it's refreshingly, brilliantly new. You see? What a great period. And it teaches us a lesson. Don't fear Don't fear the sciences. Don't fear the philosophical world. Embrace it critically, but embrace it. The faith is not opposed to reason. God, this is the medieval. God is revealed in multiple books, not just the book of faith, the biblical books, but in the book of the world. You find Christ everywhere. You find God the author everywhere, but I think you find God the Redeemer everywhere. If you have the heart and the courage to look. Remember what my friend Sarah's grandmother said? To love Sarah, you must first see her. To love the world, you must see her with love, with a heart open to love. And then she will reveal her secrets to you. To me, I'll give you my own personal take on it. It's my own view recently, in the last 20 years or so, is the wilderness. I had a desire. I was intimidated by her. Oh, God, you believe me. I am no outdoorsy guy in that regard at all. I could get lost in the backyard, okay? But I had a heart open to let the wilderness speak to me. And it has. I say it's the sacrament. It's the eighth sacrament. It's the wilderness, the wild, what Thoreau calls the wildness. Because in it, I experienced something primally beautiful. I found Christ very present, incarnational Christ present in the wilderness and in the eyes of the wolf that encountered me. That caused me trouble. When I gave a retreat for sisters, that's so stupid. This was 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Passionist nuns, oh God, what great women. But I got that nutty line off that I saw Christ in that wolf. That was one of the sisters told me later, one of the nuns said, that was a little bit much. And it is, unless you've been there. One of my students, just this year, little Anastasia, Stacia, she said to me, Father Vitale, did you ever what was a real religious experience? And I said, yeah, Stace, when the wolf walked up to me. When the wolf walked up to me. Rudolph Otto Graham was a great quarterback. Rudolph Otto said, the beginning of religion occurs when you feel your creatureliness. And that's exactly what I felt when the wolf encountered me. He didn't attack me. He just walked by me, looked at me. But he accepted me. And I knew he only accepted me because I was a fellow creature. I knew that. And I kept thinking, God, he's accepted me. It kept going through my mind. Yeah, I wasn't afraid of him at all. I hated to see him leave. He climbed an embankment, looked over at me. He was 10 steps. The closest he was to me was 7 steps because I walked it off after he left. Then he maybe was 20 feet away from me, and he looked at me. I looked at him and said, don't go away. I'm not afraid of him at all. Not because I had a rifle. The rifle's absolutely useless. It was under my poncho. What good was that going to do? I mean, this would have ate me for breakfast, crapped me out for lunch by the time I'd have got my rifle. I was nothing like that at all. I had no fear of him at all. It was an intimate moment in which the world spoke to me. The world spoke to me in the eyes of a ferocious wolf. She was beautiful. Fierce, but beautiful. That's life. And I began to realize how the wilderness was also a sacrament of the divine presence. And my heart was open to it. I let the wilderness teach me through the eyes of the wolf, through the acceptance of a wolf. That was my world. Aquinas was reading Aristotle. Aristotle was more dangerous to Christianity at that time than that wolf was to me. Way more, because he was the pagan. And Christ, St. Thomas embraced the pagan, produced the greatest theological synthesis ever achieved. I embraced the wolf, vitally accepting him, and he accepted me. Nothing is the same since then. That wolf gave me an insight, gave me an experience of the intimacy of life itself, the wildness that Thoreau speaks of. He said, wildness is the hope of humanity, hope of humanity. Hope of the world, I think that's how he said it. Wildness is the hope of the world. And I say, yeah, you're right, because Christ is wild. See? Christ is wild. Christ is an adventure, the divine adventure in the flesh. He's wild. I saw that in the eyes of the wolf. I understood the wildness of Christ in the wildness of the wolf who embraced me by accepting me.